Welcome back. So I know it's been a little bit since we did any work on the BMW, but we're gonna change that right now. So as a lot of you guys might remember, the BMW is rocking the first shaved intake we ever did for this channel. And as good as it looks, there's always room for improvement. While I did put a lot of work into it and I do really like the shaved intake look, there's one nagging problem with it. So the biggest issue is this. So you see the big hole I had to cut in the hood to make that fit. And the reason why is the truck intake sits considerably higher than the car intake. Now that's really good for low end torque with having those really long runners, but it's not good for having a one-piece hood that's not chopped up like this. Mainly the biggest problem is about an inch or so right here. And that's the part that's the only part that really interferes with it. So some of you guys might have noticed that because of that, I ended up doing this little scoop here. So this was just a really cheap $60 eBay knockoff Mustang GT scoop. So originally what I had done is went out and found somebody getting rid of an old hood, chopped a hole in it, made it fit. Then went ahead and picked up a cheap scoop, and I didn't like the way it sat on there, so I ended up fiberglassing the whole thing on. Now it did its job for a while, but it only lasted so long. And as you see, the torque from a twin turbo LS swap started showing up here and cracking the fiberglass. So that's going to twist in the hood a little bit. And the plastic tip black against the Fun Grün metallic, which is fern green for my German folks, just doesn't look that great. So we have the original hood over there, and we want to put the original hood back on. And the best way to do that is with this thing right here. So we went to our local swap meet, Jefferson County swap meet, really big swap meet held up in Wisconsin, and we found this beauty. $20, can you believe it? LS3 intake for $20. So as you might be able to notice, there is a downside, and that is, it looks like the car this came off of, they hung a valve open, and that valve smoked that runner. So we got some holes in there, and it's not looking good. But we're gonna work on this, and we're gonna fix this. And then this is going in there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna work on getting this repaired. We have a lot of other work in front of us, but we can't do any of that until we get this repaired. So we're gonna take this intake and we're gonna fix this big hole in there. And we wanna make it really good. So but honestly, for $20, would any of you guys tell me you wouldn't do this? It's not that hard. I'm not really overly concerned about it. I think we can do this. I think we can make this one work. $20 for an LS3 intake. These things flow incredibly well. And just having this on here is a gigantic horsepower increase. It's not a ton. It's already a forced induction car, but even like not going into boost, this will make a bit of a difference. And I see these things selling for, I've seen these things selling used $400 to $500, sometimes more, if they come with fuel rails and throttle body. But I don't know if they're lined with gold or what the deal is, but at $20, we weren't walking away from that. So we're gonna make this one work, and we're gonna see how well it turns out. But there's nothing left to it but to do it, so let's get to work. So our first step was actually to degrease the intake. So first thing I did, grab some degreaser, spray her down, clean it really good. So a lot of oil will end up getting into these intakes because of the PCV system, and that's just less oil vapor out, and it goes ahead and pushes it right back into the intake. So do due diligence, clean these out. You're gonna have a lot of oil build up in there. We actually got it pretty clean now, so we're about ready to work on it. I started heating up this area a little bit just to start to try to get this to contour back a little bit and try to seal back some of the areas that were kind of compromised. But the biggest step that we need to do is heat this up and bring this back up to its natural curve, because this is really flat and it's actually drooping in. I heated it up a little bit, and a little piece actually fell out the middle because it's just that far drooped in. And that was where the original hole was, and it just kind of really degraded in that area. So now we're just gonna go ahead and heat this up with a support in the back to try to bring it back to its natural contour. So get that done first. All right, getting it a little more smoothed out. It's no longer dipped in anywhere near as much as it was. Got rid of a lot of the bad area in the middle. I think we're gonna have to cut a lot of that out. So we'll probably just have to form that in a little bit when we go ahead and patch it. So trying to see how much of this is salvageable. There's a lot of hard, rough areas inside there that we're gonna have to really get in there and Dremel out, just because when the hot exhaust gas is flying through here, it's just blowing it apart as it comes through, and that's why it looks so rough in these areas. That's just from the torch. That's just a little surface. That's just a little bit of the surface coming on. We're gonna clean that up after we're done, but we got it so it's not anywhere near as low and getting a lot of these low spots out, because it was dipped in pretty heavy in the middle, but part of that's getting rid of a lot of this. So we'll keep cleaning this up, then we're gonna go ahead and clean up this whole area before we start patching this in. All right, so we got a lot of this covered up. So it looks really rough, but the general thing is it's actually very solid. Like, it's not going anywhere. So it's still very porous. I'm gonna try to smooth this out a lot more before we start to fill it in with a little bit of body filler. But for those who are curious how this step process goes, it's essentially plastic welding, and what we're doing is taking pieces that fit the spot we need of the same exact material, and this is what we pull this off. Like, I have a lot of pieces here that are all nice and clean and ready to go. That came off of the truck intakes that we shaved. So if you guys want to know more about the process of plastic welding and how the patching of the intake actually goes, I'll even put a link in the description below for our shaved intake video, but we go a lot more in depth on it. So one of the things, I think a lot of people kind of miss this. I've seen people do plastic welding before, and what you're going to see is they melt their patch pieces and just kind of melt them to the base material. And I don't think that's good enough. I think I've seen them fail because of that. And then what's going to happen is you're just melting it over the top of your base material, and you're not melting your base material. So eventually it's just going to crack. So this thing's going to be boosted. We're going to see anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds of boost through this intake. So that is plenty enough to crack that. You know, if you go ahead and take the extra steps of fiberglassing it and doing a really nice finish to it, you're going to minimize that. But one of the easiest ways I find to keep these from cracking is I do kind of a push-pull stitch technique when I plastic weld these. So in my method, I use a soldering iron, and what I do is I'll actually push the soldering iron tip through both my patch and the base material, melting them, and then kind of swirl them, push and pull them together. So that way I'm melting both the patch and the intake itself, and then mixing them together, and that's actually going to bond them. Right now we have a very, very, very solid intake. So what you're really wanting to try to accomplish here is, so imagine this is our dividing line right here from our patch to our intake. And what you're essentially trying to do is push through both of them and then fold the material. Fold. I try to go pretty deep in between these two because I don't want them just to be melted at the top. I want them to be melted through. And it's going to look ugly, but when we go over and sand this down and we're finished up, it's going to make it look a lot better. And like I said, we're going to thin the material here. So that's why you're always going to keep these little pieces, because you can just throw that on top there and start melting that into it. And now you have a little bit more filler material. And that's really the basic premise of how we do this. So we're going to go ahead and melt this because we don't want it to just skin over the top, but we want that to also impregnate in. So we're just going to fold. Remember, don't forget the fold. Very important to fold it, because this is where we're taking both materials and making them one. And again, it's a very simple process, but I think a lot of people skip over this very important step, and that's the difference between having a cracked manifold and having a really solid workpiece. And so as we start to tackle this intake, the biggest problem we're going to have is cleaning up the inside. So you can look down in there, see if I can get that. So there you go. The bottom of that intake is, well, top of the intake, because this is upside down. The top of that intake is very rough from where we did the patch. The rest of it, I got a lot of it smooth. I still have a little bit of smoothing to do right there on the side, and on that side we're pretty smooth. A little bit of smoothing left to do, but we can get that, a lot of that with the Dremel. The problem we're running into is way down. Maybe we can see it now. I got a lot of it cleaned up, but there's still some really rough spots down there. I know we're not really worried too much on this intake about super high performance and horsepower. This is not what it's built for. This is this is like a 500-600 horsepower street car that finds its power from a set of twin turbos. Now, if this thing was naturally aspirated, we'd be trying like hell to make every last inch count. And one of the things that's not going to count very well is the roughness of the inside of this intake runner is going to cause a lot of turbulence. So, like I said, it's not the end of the world for my build, but we still want to try a little, we still want to try to get that a little bit smoothed out. And the way we're going to do that is with this guy right here and this guy right here. So what we're going to do is take this MAP gas torch right here. We're going to heat the hell out of this chisel here, and then we're going to use that to go in there and smooth that out as much as possible. So that's going to melt it and press it down. It's going to try to compact that area that we melted into there in the first place, and it's going to help strengthen up the area as well. So that's going to be about the easiest way to go that far into there. I don't have Dremel bits for porting intake, which are the really, really long ones that really can get in there, and they could actually do this job very well. This will work just as well. Ooh, yeah. Just love the looks of that. You guys couldn't see it going in there, but the thing was cherry red and was glowing in the inside of this intake, so I could actually see what I was doing. Yep, you can feel that hump went away. Nice. All right, so after all that, we got a lot better look down there. So I smoothed out this a little more. You see there's a little bit right there where it was just really eaten through. Maybe I'll just hit that with some two-part epoxy. It's got some areas where that epoxy can really bite into it, and I can smooth that out. So I think what I'm gonna do is mix up some two-part epoxy, because I gotta do it on the outside as well to kind of build up that area. Now, we're not using it for strength, remember, we're just using it to smooth it. We've already plastic welded for strength. We're using the two-part epoxy to kind of build this area back up because it is still relatively flat. We're just going to use that to build it a little bit, and then we're going to use fiberglass impregnated Bondo. So that stuff's actually really, really strong, and that'll allow us to kind of smooth this out and build the area the way we need it. And then we're going to go ahead and sand a lot of that down and paint it. So almost done. It's actually about maybe an hour's worth of work into it so far, and it's really come a long way. All right, so a little bit of JB weld later. I mean, at this point, we're practically finished. I mean, at this point, we can practically say we're done. I mean, yeah, I'm going to smooth that out. I'm not going to leave it like that, come on. But we went ahead and did the inside as well. We'll smooth that out. That's just to give us a nice little glaze so that we have something to smooth out on the inside there where those really, really rough spots were. So as soon as that's completely cured, go ahead and go in there with the Dremel and smooth that out real nice and make it so we don't have any really bad turbulence when the air is flowing through that runner. So let that set up overnight. We'll give that about 24 hours. It should be perfectly cured. I can go ahead and sand that down, dress it up a little bit, work on the contours, make sure it looks really nice. Then we can go ahead and throw a couple skim coats of body filler over that and then smooth that out. And then we'll go ahead and get that ready for paint. So a little JB weld and some cure time later, this is what we got. So I actually went ahead and sanded that down too, because you don't want that ultra smooth finish on there. You need this nice and roughed up, because the next step, we're going to go ahead and do some body filler. So it may not be really easy to see in this video, but let's see if we can get a depth difference on there. It's not supposed to be as high as the opposite runners, but you see the one behind it has a nice peak to it here, and can kind of get an idea of how far off this one is. It's not too terribly off, it just needs to be raised up in this middle here and kind of given a peak, and that way it'll have that same contour as the rest of them. So we're going to mix up some body filler. We're going to go ahead and start doing some layers. Remember, thin layers. We don't want really thick ones. You're going to end up with voids in there, pinholes, other issues like that. We're going to run some thin layers and kind of build that up, and then once we're all built up, then we'll start sanding and contouring that down. so after we let that stuff cure, so it gets really hard really fast.
That's what she said. Don't you dare.
So we're able to go ahead and start sanding down. As you see, the first layer, we start getting a little bit more of our contour back. Let's see if we can get it nice. So now it's actually round instead of flat. And we're actually getting it back out to the same shape as the original runner it's supposed to look like. You see, don't worry about these. Don't worry about all the little pitting here. That's just low spots that we haven't sanded out yet. When we go through and sand this out, if you look at the edges here, where the intake still has its natural curve at, which are on the outsides here, before it got to its flat spot. So we built some of that up. As you saw before, we built some of that area up with the plastic weld and then the two-part epoxy. Now we're just trying to fill out the rest of this with the body filler, because we want to use as little body filler as possible. You don't want a big old hunk of it on there. That's going to start chipping off a lot easier. So what we're doing is using that for the very last layer. Only a couple thin skim layers should take care of that. But what we started with was feathering in around the edges to get it to the natural contour area. And then we just kind of give it a nice little rough sand over just to take off any of the high spots from the body filler. You can now start to see all the areas that it's low is in this area right here. So this is the area we need to build up some more. Right here is where it's still good and we didn't have to add any filler into. So we'll just keep building this area up right here. Thin layer at a time, sanding it out until it looks really close to what it was originally supposed to be. Well, that's about 3 really thin coats of body filler, and as you can see, the low spots are practically gone. We have some little pitting here, but there's a special filler we use for that that's for pinholes, and we'll have to put a skim coat right over that. See, it very, very smooth. It's hard to see, but practically, if you can't feel it, you can't see it. So that's kind of the method to work by. Pretty much, you can close your eyes, and if you can feel it, you'll see it. So there is a little bit of a line right here where it's not contoured all the way down, but it's on the back side. I'm not going for perfection here. I know there is some warping to the manifold here in this area from the melting. It kind of, like the line through here is getting pushed over into it. The thing is, I've smoothed out the plastic enough in that area that I can feel it a little bit, but from the way the manifold's actually gonna be sitting in the car, you're not gonna actually be able to see it. Plus, there's only so much work I want to put into this. Honestly, I know that somebody with more skill set can do this the right way. This is the way I'm doing it because this is the way I feel comfortable with it, and and I'm not going for a SEMA quality build. This isn't a show car. I just wanted to take this burnt up manifold and bring it back to usable condition with also not looking like it had a big patch in it. So for the purposes of what I'm doing, this is going to work just fine. Plus, I'm going to be doing a textured paint job over this. I'm not a huge fan of like high gloss intakes. I'm not saying they're bad, it's just that's not what I want to go for. And if you're doing a textured paint job, you don't have to pay attention to all the little small imperfections because you're not going to be able to see them once that texture lays down. If you're trying to paint match your intake to your chassis and you're going for high gloss, you have to put the time into it. This is not going to be good enough. You will see the minor imperfections in there. They will show up like a sore thumb. We're going to go for a matte or satin color on this one, and it's going to be textured prior to that, so we don't have to worry about that. So for this instance, other than putting some filler into these pinholes, we're actually perfectly done. We're done with this. So, all right, so we went ahead and threw a quick coat of primer on there. That way everything kind of looks uniform and we can actually see a lot. We can really get a better grasp of any of the defects we're having after we put that coat of primer on there, because all the little details, all the little defects, they're all going to come out once you put that coat of primer on or paint. So now that we have that, we can actually start seeing the pinholes a little bit better. So you can see them popping out a lot more. And for that, we got some glazing putty here. then this is what you do for a final once over. This one is no hardener, so you're not going to have as hard or as nice of a filler on there, but it's not really meant to cover a large area. It's meant to fill in the little pinholes, and it's a lot easier to work with because of that. So what we're going to do is kind of start sanding that down a little bit, prep it to put that on, and we're just going to fill in these little areas. So pretty much all these little pinholes, and some in there as well. So actually, no, it's a little piece of debris. Never mind. So, but as you can see, so right here's our runner that was damaged. And if you look at it, we actually got a nice contour to that matches almost exactly one of the undamaged runners. Almost really hard to see. And once we get this all finished up with the glazing putty and we hit it with our final coat of primer, we're actually, really the only difference you can tell in a lot of these is how smooth this is versus how rough this finish is. And this is the original textured finish. I did kind of rough it up a little bit before putting the primer down, but it's still kind of rough. Once we're completely finished with this runner, we're going to go ahead and hit it with a textured finish. You're not going to be able to tell the difference between these runners. They're going to look exactly the same when they're all textured out. But we're going to go ahead and fill in these, get them sanded, and then put the final coat of primer on it. And then this will be done. So after all that work, what are we left with? Not too bad. What you're seeing here, though, isn't any defects. That's just the fact that the intake is normally black and the filler is kind of a bluish color, and this is just kind of the fade through. A couple more layers of primer, you won't even see that. You're just seeing how the primer's changing colors as it hits the different textures. But overall, you really can't tell. Once I get the textured paint on there, it's really gonna blend in real nicely, and it's gonna look pretty much factory. So yeah, I mean, 20 bucks for the intake and a minimal amount of supplies, a few hours into it, and we repaired this really badly damaged intake. So like I said, this one's gonna be going on the BMW here, and we're gonna be able to put the original hood back onto the car now, which I'm just really psyched to do. Since I've started this project, I've wanted to put the original hood back on it, and now I finally get to do it. So guess what? That means the next episode we do on this car, we're gonna be putting that hood back on, and it's gonna look a lot better. So I just can't wait. So thanks for watching. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. Do the necessary, guys.